want you to picture something for me. It's the dark, quiet night of August 8th, 1963. A Royal Mail train is hurtling down the tracks on its completely routine overnight route from Glasgow down to London. The engine is roaring, cutting through the absolute pitch black of the British countryside. But suddenly, this colossal machine comes to a grinding, unexpected halt. What happened next, right there in the dead of night, would go down in history as the Great Train Robbery.
Okay, let's dive right into this because the sheer scale of what was taken that night is truly staggering. The thieves didn't just walk away with a few heavy bags. They stole the modern equivalent of 67 million pounds. To put that into perspective, that's roughly 800 crores. It was a heist of unimaginable proportions, practically stealing a government train straight off the tracks. So that brings us to the central mystery of our explainer today. How on earth did a group of criminals steal a moving train and make off with an absolute fortune, all without firing a single shot? Well, it didn't happen by accident. It began months earlier when a mastermind named Bruce Reynolds sat down with a few associates in London. Reynolds had this grand vision, but he knew he lacked the specific expertise to actually pull it off. So he meticulously assembled a 15-man crew, which included an experienced and notorious gang known as the South Coast Raiders.
Now, to understand the heist, you have to understand this three-step process of how the mail was handled. It illustrates exactly why the plan had to be so complex. You see, this wasn't just your average passenger train. It was a highly specialized Royal Mail train with 12 carriages and 72 staff members sorting mail on the go. To avoid stopping, local post office staff would literally hang mailbags on elevated racks at the stations. As the train rolled through, it would slow down just enough so the staff inside could use specialized nets to catch the bags while simultaneously dropping off the outgoing mail. It was this perfectly choreographed, non-stop dance. And that is exactly why a sudden red stop signal in the middle of nowhere was so deeply jarring for the 58-year-old train driver, Jack Mills.
Section 1. The Secret Master Plan. So, how did the gang know exactly when and where to strike? Well, this leads us to a shadowy, unknown figure, a senior security officer inside the Royal Mail itself. This insider fed Bruce Reynolds everything he needed to know. Just look at the normal train conditions compared to what was happening on August 8th. Normally, the high-value packages, or HVP carriage, carried about 300,000 pounds and was equipped with a newly installed security alarm system. But the insider provided two brilliant, game-changing tips. First, the weekend prior was a bank holiday, meaning the cash flow spiked tenfold to roughly 3 million pounds. Second, the alarmed HVP carriages were conveniently out of service for repairs. Instead, a reserve carriage, M3024M, was being used and it had absolutely no security alarms. Literally a perfect storm. Section 2. The Midnight Train Ambush. Knowing all this, the gang moved into position. Let's jump back to that dark morning of August 8th. The gang is waiting in absolute silence, hiding in the bushes near the tracks at Sears Crossing. Their hearts are pounding as the roar of the Glasgow train approaches. At exactly 3 a.m., a gang member tampered with the crossing signal. It's actually kind of genius. They cleverly covered the green light with a glove and used a portable battery to illuminate the red light. Driver Jack Mills saw the red light and, following protocol, brought the train to a halt. His assistant stepped out to use the line-side phone, only to find the wires had been cut. Suddenly, the gang swarms from the bushes, climbing into the engine from both sides. When Jack Mills tried to resist, the situation turned brutally violent. A robber struck him over the head with an iron rod, knocking him completely unconscious. Meanwhile, the rest of the gang successfully decoupled the first two carriages from the rest of the train. But here is where they hit their first major hiccup. The gang had actually brought along a hired, retired railway driver to move the hijacked carriages to their unloading point. However, when this replacement driver climbed into the cabin, he completely panicked. The engine controls were a newer model he had never operated. So, with their own guy frozen, the gang had to hastily revive a bleeding, severely traumatized Jack Mills and force him to drive the train 1 kilometer further down the track. Section 3. 15 minutes to escape. The tension is absolutely peaking now. Jack Mills brings the train to a halt at Bridego Bridge. Down below on the road, the gang's getaway vehicles are waiting, an Austin Lodestar truck and 2 Land Rovers. And get this, they were all cleverly fitted with matching fake license plates. BMG 757, just to confuse any witnesses. The clock is seriously ticking now. The plan dictated they had exactly 15 minutes before the authorities would inevitably realize something was wrong. Just 15 minutes to break into the HVP carriage,
subdue the 5 male staff inside, and physically move 2.5 tons of cash. To pull this off, they quickly formed a human chain, passing the heavy sacks down from the bridge to the truck on the road below. Just to visualize the sheer volume of the loot here, inside the carriage were 128 sacks, stuffed to the brim with 1, 5, and 10 shilling notes. The human chain worked furiously, but time ran out. They successfully moved 120 bags onto the truck, but had to abandon the remaining 8 bags as that tight 15-minute window closed. Before disappearing into the night, one of the robbers turned to the 5 post office workers lying tied up on the floor of the carriage and delivered this chilling final warning: "Don't try to move for 30 minutes or you'll lose your life." And with those parting words, the gang fled. After a very tense 45-minute drive, the gang safely arrived at their rented hideout, Leatherslade Farm in Oakley. They had done it. They had just pulled off the crime of the century, dividing up a staggering £2.5 million, making each core member incredibly wealthy overnight. But this begs the ultimate question. If the ambush was so perfect, how did it all completely fall apart?
Section 4. The Monopoly Board Mistake.
The unraveling of the plan all comes back to a fatal mistake and a bit of brilliant police work. While hiding at the farm, the gang was listening to VHF police radios. Their celebratory mood quickly turned to absolute panic. They realized the police were already searching for them, and specifically within a tight 50-kilometer radius. But how did the police know they were so close? Well, it was a brilliant deduction based directly on the gang's own parting threat. Because the robbers explicitly said don't move for 30 minutes, the police correctly deduced that the gang's hideout had to be precisely a 30-minute drive away. Spooked by this radio chatter, the gang realized they couldn't wait out the weekend. They wiped down the farmhouse, paid a hired hand to burn the entire place to the ground to destroy all evidence, and scattered. But the hired hand just took the money and ran, leaving the hideout completely intact. Soon after, a neighbor tipped off the police about suspicious activity. When authorities raided Leatherslade Farm, they hit the jackpot. They found the empty mail sacks, the Austin Lodestar truck hastily painted yellow, and a Monopoly board. Now, what's really interesting about this is the staggering irony. The gang had been so incredibly meticulous about wiping down the doorknobs, the tables, and the truck to erase their fingerprints. But in their arrogance, while waiting at the farm, they had entertained themselves by playing a game of Monopoly using the actual stolen money. They wiped everything clean, except the game pieces and the board. Section 5. The tragic human cost. Those fingerprints left on the Monopoly board were a massive breakthrough for Scotland Yard. Because the crew was made up of known criminals, those prints easily matched existing criminal records. Within days, the dragnet closed in, and 14 of the 16 men were caught, tried, and handed massive 30-year prison sentences. But it's really easy to get swept up in the Hollywood-style glamour of a brilliant heist, and we have to ground this story in harsh reality. The true victim here was the 58-year-old train driver, Jack Mills. Because of the brutal blow to the head he sustained during the hijacking, Mills suffered severe trauma. He was never able to return to work, his life was forever altered, and tragically he passed away just 7 years later due to complications from the attack. Today, the location of the heist is informally known as Train Robbers Bridge, serving as a permanent monument to that dark August night. But I want to leave you with this final thought. Yes, 14 men faced justice, but 2 men literally vanished into thin air, never to be identified. The replacement train driver who panicked, and the mastermind insider within the Royal Mail who made the entire thing possible. To this very day, their true identities remain a complete mystery. As we look back at the legacy of the Great Train Robbery and the truly tragic fate of Jack Mills, we have to ask, was the price of a man's life really worth it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this helped shed some light on one of history's most fascinating heists.